On my 65th birthday, my daughter-in-law told me my dinner had to wait because her mother needed the house for tea. I said only 2 words, "I understand." Then I canceled the one thing she was counting on. By sunset, my son was screaming into my voicemail. The lesson: kindness is not permission to use me. Your birthday dinner is going to have to wait. My mom is having a little tea party this afternoon. My daughter-in-law, Harper, said casually over the phone. I stood in my bright kitchen, looking out at the colorful autumn leaves in my backyard, and took a slow, deep breath. Today was my 65th birthday. I had planned a lovely evening and prepaid for delivery from a phenomenal local deli. Harper and my son, Nolan, had been living rent-free in my finished attic for 8 months, supposedly saving up for a down payment on a house of their own. Since moving in, Harper had slowly rearranged my cabinets, eaten through my expensive groceries, and started treating me like an invisible live-in maid. I understand, I whispered, perfectly calm. Good thing you're so easygoing, she replied immediately. The deli catering is getting here at 2 p.m. anyway. It works out perfectly for my mom and her friends. See you later. She hung up without waiting for my response. For a moment, my hand tightened around the phone, not because I was afraid, but because I finally understood how long I had been letting this happen. I didn't shed a single tear. Maybe I was hurt, but beneath that hurt was something sharper. I was done. I didn't call back to argue, beg, or explain myself. Instead, I grabbed my iPad from the marble countertop. Harper seriously thought she could just hijack my prepaid birthday dinner and use it as a free buffet for her mother's guests. I logged into the deli's customer portal and canceled the entire $600 order. Because of the short notice, the shop kept a decent cancellation fee, but I didn't care. I would rather lose that money than let Harper use my birthday dinner to play hostess for her mother. Afterward, I slipped on my navy wool coat, grabbed my car keys, and left the house. I drove downtown in complete peace, treated myself to a top-tier facial, and sat in my favorite coffee shop. Exactly 6 hours later, my phone buzzed on the table. It was Nolan, completely panicking on my voicemail. Harper's mother was sitting in the living room with her elite guests, and there was absolutely nothing to eat. I finished my coffee. The real lesson was just beginning. When I got back to the house that evening, the first floor was dead silent. I hung up my coat and played Nolan's voicemail again on speaker. He sounded absolutely desperate. Harper's mother was humiliated because she had promised her friends a luxurious catered spread that never showed up. They ended up having to serve dry crackers and tap water. I felt zero pity. If you want to control my property and my money, you have to learn how quickly I can turn off the tap. I walked into my spacious living room and sat down on the soft leather sofa. Up until now, out of pure kindness, I had been sharing my high-speed internet with the attic. Harper spent hours streaming shows in 4K and online shopping. I stood up, walked over to the hallway closet, and unplugged both Wi-Fi extenders that boosted the signal upstairs. Then, I logged into the main router's settings on my tablet and changed the password. It didn't take 20 minutes before I heard heavy, rushed footsteps on the stairs. Harper stood in the hallway, clutching her smartphone, furious. "The Wi-Fi is down!" she yelled into the room, not even bothering to say hello. I calmly turned the page of my magazine. That's correct. I answered without looking up. I changed the password. I pay for this connection myself. If you guys want to stream, work, and shop online every night, you can set up your own internet plan tomorrow. Harper stared at me, dumbfounded. But how am I supposed to watch my shows? Nolan still has emails to answer. I flipped another page and adjusted my reading glasses. Sounds like a problem you two can solve with your own internet provider. I'm sure they have some great sign-up deals. I left her standing right there in the hallway and went to the kitchen to pour myself a glass of water. Harper stomped back up the stairs. The first invisible boundary had been successfully drawn, and the air in the house already felt lighter. I woke up early the next morning. The autumn sun was streaming through my large bedroom windows. Before getting dressed, I headed down to the kitchen. Since moving in, Harper had made a habit of using my high-end espresso machine as if she owned it. She never bought replacement beans, never emptied the coffee grounds, and frequently left puddles of spilled milk on the counter. I didn't hide the machine, but I took practical steps. I opened the hopper, dumped my expensive, freshly roasted espresso beans into an airtight container, and locked it in the pantry. Then, I removed the water tank and stashed it in the bottom drawer of the kitchen island. An hour later, Harper came padding down the stairs in her fluffy bathrobe, making a beeline for the coffee maker. I was already sitting at the dining table, reading the morning paper and enjoying a perfect cup of black coffee. She pressed the power button. Nothing happened. Confused. She started looking around for the water tank. "Where are the parts for the coffee maker?" she asked. Irritated. "And where are the beans?" I folded my newspaper neatly. "I put my beans away," I said, my voice completely level. "And I'm in the middle of cleaning the machine. If you want coffee, there's a jar of instant in the cabinet." Harper looked at the cheap jar of instant coffee like I had just offered her poison. "I don't drink instant coffee. You know that. I need my oat milk cappuccino to wake up." I smiled pleasantly, stood up, and took my empty mug to the sink. "Then you should probably get dressed and walk down to the coffee shop. From today on, my espresso machine is strictly for my own use." Nolan walked into the kitchen mid-yawn and caught Harper's furious expression. "What's going on?" he mumbled, rubbing his eyes. I grabbed my purse from the hook. "Morning, Nolan. The instant coffee is right over there," I said breezily, leaving the two of them alone in the kitchen. 2 days later, it was time for my weekly grocery run. In the past, Harper had often taken my car without asking. She'd just grab the keys from the hook by the door, drive to her Pilates studio or the mall, and consistently leave the car in the driveway running on fumes. I put on my coat and reached into my purse, where my keys had been safely tucked away since yesterday. Just then, Harper came rushing down the stairs, already dressed in her workout gear. She scanned the empty key hook and let out an exaggerated sigh. "Where are the keys to the car?" she asked impatiently. "I'm already late for Pilates." I took my time buttoning my coat. "The keys are in my purse," I answered matter-of-factly. "I'm heading to the grocery store, and then I'm meeting a friend for coffee and cake." Harper crossed her arms over her chest. "But I need the car now." "You could have done your shopping later." "How am I supposed to get to the studio on time?" I looked her dead in the eye. "No apologies, no excuses. It's my vehicle. Harper, I pay the insurance, the registration, and the gas. You're going to have to buy your own car or take public transit. The bus stop is a 5-minute walk from here." She stared at me in disbelief. "You're forcing me to take the bus." "That is ridiculous." I opened the front door, feeling the crisp, cool air on my face. "I'm not forcing you to do anything. I am simply using my own property whenever it suits me." Without another word, I stepped outside and pulled the door quietly shut behind me. I got into my car, started the engine, and slowly backed out of the driveway. In the rearview mirror, I could see Harper glaring out the hallway window. My morning belonged entirely to me, and the rush of independence was absolutely wonderful. The weekend was usually laundry day. Nolan and Harper had gotten entirely too comfortable stuffing their dirty clothes into my washing machine in the utility room. They silently expected me to run the cycle, switch their things to the dryer, and maybe even fold them when they were done. On Saturday morning, I found the washer filled to the brim once again with Harper's expensive blouses and Nolan's gym clothes. I took a deep breath. I wasn't mad. I was just following through. I pulled a large plastic laundry basket out of the closet, opened the washer, and pulled out every single piece of their clothing. I neatly laid their dry, dirty laundry into the basket. Then, I hauled the heavy load up the stairs and placed it squarely in front of their bedroom door. Afterward, I went back to the utility room, loaded the machine exclusively with my own towels, added detergent, and hit start. Around noon, I heard Nolan calling out from the hallway. He came down the stairs, carrying the basket. "Mom, why did you leave our laundry outside our door? We don't have anything clean for work next week." I stood at the stove, slowly stirring a pot of fresh vegetable soup. "Because it's your laundry, Nolan," I explained calmly. "I am not your maid. You are both grown adults and can operate the machine yourselves. You will need to buy your own detergent, though mine is almost out." Nolan rubbed the back of his neck nervously. "But Harper says she doesn't have time to deal with laundry today. You always get it done so fast." I turned the heat down on the stove. "Then today is a great day for her to start learning," I said smoothly. "The manual is in the top drawer." Nolan opened his mouth to argue, but quickly snapped it shut. He knew he didn't have a logical leg to stand on. He carried the basket back upstairs in total silence. I tasted my soup. It was excellent. And the faint, fresh scent of my clean towels lingered beautifully in the background. By late November, the real cold had set in. My house was large and well insulated, but Harper had a terrible habit of cranking the upstairs radiators to the absolute max while leaving her windows cracked open for hours. The utility bill, which was pulled straight from my checking account, had skyrocketed. I had asked her nicely once to be more mindful, but she just gave me a patronizing smile. The time for talking was over. I had upgraded the house to smart thermostats 2 years ago, which meant I could control everything centrally. On Sunday evening, I sat comfortably in my reading chair, opened the app on my phone, and selected the heating zones for the attic. I capped the maximum temperature for their space at exactly 68 degrees Fahrenheit and locked out the manual controls on the devices themselves. It was a perfectly normal, healthy room temperature. About an hour later, I heard rapid footsteps. Harper came storming into the living room, wrapped tightly in a thick fleece blanket. "The heat upstairs is broken," she complained loudly. "It's freezing up there, and the dials won't turn." I casually flipped the page of my mystery novel. "The heat is working perfectly," I said without a hint of agitation. I programmed the system to cap out at 68 degrees. Given current energy prices, that is more than reasonable. Harper's eyes went wide. 68. I'm freezing. I need it to be at least 75 if I'm sitting on the couch at night. I set my book down on the end table and looked at her pleasantly. "Then I suggest you buy a warm sweater or put on some heavy socks. If you want to control the thermostat, you are more than welcome to rent your own apartment and pay your own utility bills." She stared at me, speechless, pulled her blanket tighter around her shoulders, and vanished without another word. The boundaries of my home were getting stronger by the day. The large stainless steel fridge in the main kitchen had always been treated as shared territory. In practice, that meant I stocked it, and Nolan and Harper emptied it. I constantly found nothing but empty wrappers or the tiny, scraped-out remnants of my favorite jam. That Tuesday morning, I decided to kill that dynamic for good. I went out and bought a compact but high-end mini fridge and had 2 delivery guys bring it straight up to my spacious master bedroom. Once they left, I moved all of my fresh groceries, my good cheeses, and my fresh produce out of the kitchen and into my new private fridge. I left the main refrigerator exactly as it was completely bare. When Nolan got home from work that evening, he opened the kitchen fridge out of pure habit. I heard him sigh loudly. "Mom, didn't we go grocery shopping? There's absolutely nothing in here, not even milk for tomorrow morning." I sat at the dining table, jotting down some appointments in my planner. "I went shopping," I replied calmly. "But starting today, I am only buying groceries for myself. If you guys need food, you'll need to stop at the supermarket on your way home." Nolan scratched his head, looking totally overwhelmed. "But we're saving for our house. If we have to pay for all our own groceries now, we won't be able to save nearly as much." I put my pen down and folded my hands on the table. "Nolan, your savings plan is not my financial burden. I let you live here rent-free for 8 months and heavily subsidized your meals. That arrangement is over." Harper walked into the room and peered into the empty fridge. Her face darkened instantly. "This is just petty harassment," she hissed. "No," I corrected her, completely unbothered. "It's called financial independence. By the way, the takeout menus are still in the top drawer." I stood up and went to my bedroom, which was now officially my secure sanctuary. That Saturday, without running it by me, Harper planned a small afternoon reception in my sunroom. Her mother had invited 6 friends over, and Harper fully expected to use my sunroom. My crystal glasses, my fine china, the plush armchairs, and the large round table. I overheard her on the phone bragging about how cozy her sunroom was going to look in the late afternoon light. I just shook my head softly. Around noon, while Harper and Nolan were out running errands, I walked into the sunroom. I packed up my crystal, the silverware, and the fine china, and locked them away in the hutch. I gathered all the soft throw blankets and pillows and brought them to my bedroom. Then, I locked the French doors leading into the sunroom and dropped the key into my purse. Around 5 p.m., the first guests arrived. Harper led them down the hall with a proud smile, but she stopped dead in her tracks in front of the locked doors. Her face went rigid. She jiggled the brass handle, but the door wouldn't budge. "Why is the sunroom locked?" she hissed, while her guests hovered awkwardly behind her. "My guests are here." I was sitting in the living room, sipping herbal tea and looking up from my book. "Because the sunroom is part of my private living space," I said evenly. "You never asked me if you could use it for your party." Nolan stood next to her, looking anxious. "Mom, please, don't embarrass us in front of Harper's guests." I placed my bookmark between the pages. "I'm not embarrassing anyone. If you invite people over without asking the host, or asking to use her space and her dishes, you embarrass yourself." Harper turned beet red. But her mother's friends had already caught on to exactly what was happening. Without my space, my glasses, and my silent compliance, her entire illusion of control collapsed in a matter of seconds. I took a sip of my tea and peacefully went back to reading. 2 days after the disastrous afternoon party, Nolan and Harper were sitting in the kitchen in dead silence. The tension in the house was incredibly thick, but I felt lighter than I had in years. I made myself a fresh cup of coffee and took a seat at the head of the large wooden table. I slid a plain white envelope over to Nolan. He eyed it suspiciously. "What is this?" he asked quietly. Harper crossed her arms and glared at me. "That is your formal, written notice to vacate," I said, my voice quiet but steady. I consulted an attorney beforehand. "Your permission to occupy this space is being terminated properly. You have 30 days to pack your things and find your own place." Nolan went pale instantly. You're kicking us out. Just like that, Mom. We're family. I slowly shook my head. Family respects one another. You both treated me like an unpaid employee and abused my generosity. I let you live here for free. And in return, my birthday dinner was hijacked, and my property was treated as an entitlement. Harper let out a sarcastic laugh. You can't even manage this massive house on your own. You need us. I looked at her, feeling absolutely zero need to justify myself. I will manage beautifully on my own. Actually, I'm planning to rent the upstairs to a quiet grad student. I'll be using the extra income to travel. Nolan buried his face in his hands. It finally dawned on him that his passive behavior had cost him everything. Please, Mom, we can barely afford market rent right now. We'll change. I pushed the envelope an inch closer to him. It's too late for promises. Nolan, the decision is final. Use the next 30 days wisely to find something affordable. I stood up, took my coffee mug with me, and left them alone with the cold, hard reality of their future. Those 30 days flew by surprisingly fast. Without my constant financial safety net and the everyday luxury of my high-end appliances, Nolan and Harper had to learn a very painful lesson about how expensive the real world actually is. They eventually found a cramped, dark, two-bedroom apartment on the far outskirts of town. On moving day, a beat-up rented U-Haul sat parked in my driveway. Nolan hauled heavy cardboard boxes, while Harper packed her endless bags in bitter silence. She didn't even try to speak to me, which suited me just fine. I stood calmly by the front door, watching the entire process without stepping in or offering to help. Once the last box was loaded, Nolan walked over to me hesitantly. He looked incredibly exhausted. I guess we're taking off, he mumbled, dropping his old house key on the small wooden console table in the hallway. Take care of yourself. Nolan, I said simply without going in for a hug, There was no dramatic goodbye, no fake tears. I shut the front door firmly behind them and slid the deadbolt into place. That very same afternoon, I had a locksmith come out and replace the locks on all the exterior doors. Afterward, I walked up to the attic. The rooms were completely bare and smelled a bit like stale air. I pushed all the windows wide open and let the crisp, cool wind blow through the house. The following week, I had the walls painted a warm, inviting cream color and hung up beautiful new curtains. My home was finally, entirely mine again. On Sunday, I hosted my delayed birthday dinner. I invited 4 of my closest friends, ordered the exact $600 catering spread I had canceled weeks prior, and we laughed late into the night. Later that night, I sat alone in my tidy living room and listened to the quiet. For the first time in months, it didn't feel empty. It felt safe. Setting boundaries hadn't made me lonely. It had given me my home back.